congratulations. I've been checking in on drivekickstarter.com, and you have blown the doors off of this one in the first 24 hours. I'm so thrilled for you.
Yes, I'm very happy with how it's going, but I got to tell you, remember how I was telling you there was a lot of moments of confidence leading up to it? Like, this is going to be okay. This Kickstarter is going to do fine. There was an afternoon where all of a sudden the floor fell out from my confidence, where I was like, oh no, this is all ash and woe. This is gnashing of teeth. This is not going to make it. What am I doing? What
was I thinking?
It was funny that for a project that had, for me, a 98% confidence rate, all of a sudden I was like, oh no, this isn't going to work. No one's going to want this. Why would anyone want this? Oh God, like what happened there? That was weird. It was a weird afternoon.
What caused that, do you think?
I don't know. It was probably too much coffee and just a generalized anxiety that got transferred onto the project, I think. I don't know. It's also, we all put a lot of hopes and dreams into these things, and so maybe it's just there's a certain breaking point where your mind goes, well, wait a minute, what if it doesn't work? And then you, in a sense, it's one of those things where it's like it's preparing you to take certain steps in case something fails or goes wrong, or I guess. But anyway, I wanted you to know that amongst an otherwise sea of confidence, there was an afternoon where I was like, oh God, Bradley.
Wow.
Bradley.
Well, listen, when I saw you launch on Twitter, in other words, the first day I went over and you had already beaten your goal. You'd already made your goal. Now I want to replicate. I want to replicate that in my life. How did you do that? What were the strategies you used?
Okay, so we haven't talked about this in about 15 or 20 shows. So what I do is the average. In fact, we haven't talked about this because this is new. The average Kickstarter campaign, 30 days long, right? They recommend 30 days because psychologically that's the number everyone's gotten used to.
Yeah.
Bitty buddy boom. Let's do 30 days. You go too long, basically, and also people's sense of what's the word am I
urgency?
Looking for? Urgency. Thank you.
Yeah.
30 keeps just enough urgency. And frankly, Brad, as you and I and everyone who's ever run a Kickstarter knows, the first 5 days and the last 5 days are the bulk of the work. And frankly, the other 20 days are like you make 1% a day, that kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the urgency is important. I get that. But here's what I did this year. I added a day. It's 31 days for this Kickstarter campaign. And I secretly opened it up just to my Patreon backers. So that they could get access to 3 tiers that only Patreon got access to that had additional savings.
Yeah.
And so, it rewards them for being nice and supporting me all year long for what is a very financially rewarding Patreon. So there's that. And then also, it encourages them to help me boost the Kickstarter algorithms by getting it all done quickly. So, as right now, we're as of this recording, we are 2.5 days in, and it's at 52, I think, 52,000, something like that. And what's great is because that the arc of almost every Kickstarter is the same, the growth chart arc. It's a huge exponential growth chart up for the first 3 days, and then there's a really leveling off, and then the last 3 or 4 days is another big exponential jump up, right? That's the standard curve of every Kickstarter.
There's a member on webcomics.com who recently referred to it as the bathtub curve. In other words, if you picture a bathtub from a side view, it starts really high, then it slopes down and it arcs, and then it flatlines, and then towards the end it starts sloping up again and it ends really high.
Yeah.
That's what this person referred to as the bathtub curve.
Well, and here's another way of looking at it, is that Beth, my assistant Beth, by way of tracking this project, she started building a chart in Illustrator that we could track it. And I said, you know what? Go to kicktrack.com and grab a screenshot of all grab the Kickstarter dashboard chart of all of the Kickstarters that I've done. And I think I've done 7 now. And we overlaid all of them. And despite the fact that they were differences in money, like some of them were $50,000 Kickstarters, some of them were $108,000 Kickstarters, you put them all overlaid one on top of another one, Brad, they're all almost mathematically identical in terms of how that graph works.
Yeah.
And so there is an argument to be made for jumping out of the gate big, because if you can get it as high as possible before it levels out, your project is going to end better. in the same way that like there's compounding interest on a bank account, it's
Hmm.
almost as if you can get as big as you can before it starts to level out. Then that last spurt in those last 3 to 5 days is gonna bring you to even bigger heights.
Yeah.
So I did that Patreon thing, which I've done the last 2 or 3 campaigns, and it just worked really well for Drive because I'm gonna tell you a little secret, Brad. Nerds love their sci-fi. Nerds love their sci-fi, myself included.
Yeah.
And so the support for that comic is unlike anything I ever have with Sheldon. And so people came out. But what's amazing to me is I also emailed everybody from my previous Patreon for Drive, of which
Yes.
there were 1,600 people, and I said, "Hey, book 2 is ready." And I'm at day, what would I say, 2.5 now, and I'm only at 700 people. So my thought is, those people are eventually going to back. Where are they right
Right.
now? Like, what's going on
Right.
that's keeping those 900 people from backing? Like, what are they doing?
Well, and there's something also I want to just concur with that, and that is we're always as cartoonists we're always a little bit worried about being spammy. I'm worried about being spammy, right? I don't want to cross that line. What you just mentioned is not only not spammy, but when I didn't do it on my last Kickstarter, in other words, reaching out to backers of previous Kickstarters, when I didn't do that, I actually got some concerned emails saying, "How come you haven't done this yet?" From people
Oh,
who
yeah.
are expect. Not only do they expecting it, they want it. They want the heads up that the next project is out, and they had found out about it through another means, and they're like, "Dude, you got to give us the heads up here. I almost missed that." Just as a little tangent, not only should you not be afraid to do that, you absolutely should be putting that as a solid, concrete check mark on your Kickstarter list. Reach out to backers of previous projects of yours.
Yeah. And if, like me, you've had a past project which doesn't feel parallel to it, like, for example, my last Kickstarted book was a pug collection of pug comic strips. And then
Yeah.
before that, there was one that was an Anatomy of Animals comic strip, right? It was just goofy jokes about different species of animals. And obviously, the Venn diagram there is pretty far apart for a sci-fi strip that has a epic scope and is comedic and all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Except when you stop and think about it, there is a lot of characters in Drive that, like Dylan McConis describes them, they're kind of Muppet-like. So the way I
Yes.
pitched it to those Anatomy and of Animals, I was like, it's the same kind of goofy, big-eyed Muppet-like humor that you found in Anatomy of Animals and Pugs Unleashed, and here's why you might like it. And sure enough, there are people that have been like, you know what, I will jump in on this. So you don't know what your past readers are going to support, so you might as well try. They're already fans of
Exactly.
yours on some level. They at least know what your humor is like or what your writing is like. So give it a chance. Reach out to them. Is my
No,
attitude.
I think you're absolutely right. And I'm super thrilled to see that that drivekickstarter.com is going over so well. Because you're my friend. I like, we've been friends for a long time, and you know that I love you like a brother. But I am genuinely a fan of Drive, and I've got the first hardcover, and I'm one of these people that don't read it online. I cannot, I don't follow it as well online. So I've been waiting for this hardcover for a long time. I can't wait to see what happens next in this story.
Well, yeah, it's interesting you should mention that because I actually don't like reading long form online. It's one of the things that, like, even 10 years ago, I would be like, long form can't work online. No one wants to read that because basically I was mirror marketing. I don't want to read things long form online. Like, it
Right.
tires my eyes out for whatever reason. So I am like you. I like a book format. And frankly, this story was written for a book. You know, it's
Hmm.
when you're planning certain things out, there are some pages where people go, well, why did this happen? And you're like, well, you'll see 20 pages from now. In a book, it won't be that big a deal. But
Right.
granted, in a comic, it's weird, but in a book, it won't be that weird. So yeah, so it's written for book format.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a bigger Kickstarter than my average one in terms of money by a factor of 2, which is
Mm.
like, oh wow, great, Dave's doing great. But I want everybody to know that that has to amortize across 2.5, maybe 3 years, because I can't do a Drive book every year. It only can
Right.
come out every 2.5 to 3 years. So whatever number this is going to end up at, and it's probably going to be somewhere around 100,000. You're like, wow, great, gangbusters. Yes, that's lovely, but it's also got to be amortized across a couple years because this one book has to represent my earnings for 2016 through 2018 of Drive comic creation. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah. And that's where, yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's where Patreon comes into play as well. Is that you need that to kind of even out the bumps in between. But this Kickstarter's has got to last.
Yeah.
You've got one chance to make a big impact.
I'm like that guy at Vegas. This has got to pay, Brad. Old Brad has got to pay.
Baby needs a new pair of shoes.
Yeah. So by the time all the taxes and expenses and all this and that are going to come out, the honest to God truth is this book will probably represent about 15,000 a year. Not a
Yeah.
lot, right? Like you can't live
Right.
off that. But between that and Patreon, oh boy, that's a real nice living right there,
Yep.
actually. So I just want people to know that like you're going to see for every cartoonist that you see on Kickstarter, if they have like an $80,000 payday, a $200,000 payday, you have to think that that's not just for that week. That has to keep them going for the next couple of years until the next book can come out. So there's
Yep.
even the big hits are amortized across a lot of time. So
So
there's
keep
that.
that in mind.
But anyway, but thank you though, Brad, for checking it out over at drivekickstarter.com. And I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Because you took basically a 4-week vacation, Brad.
Yeah.
A 4-week vacation. And I have to tell you, as someone who mentally can't take more than a 2 or 3 day vacation without going bonkers, how did that go for you? How did that overall summer work for you?
Well, listen, number one, it was the best thing I ever did. Number two, you're the reason I was able to do it, because way back when, you were the first person from my circle of web cartoonists that I paid attention to in front of and behind the scenes. You were the first person to take a week off for Christmas, and I remember you posting on your blog that not only did you do it, but it was a smart thing for you to do. It was good for your health. It was good for your family, and you're glad that you had done it. And so after that, I started taking a week off around Christmas and
Right.
taking a holiday. So this year, what ended up happening was August turned into just a monster month for me in terms of everything else that was going on in my life. As you guys know, who've been listening to the show for a long time, the first week I was up in Michigan with my family. The second week I was home, but we were preparing to take for me and my son to go down to Huntsville, Alabama, where he was taking space camp. And then the following week, I was in space camp working out of a Huntsville hotel. And then the next week, we came home, and I had started teaching a college class one day a week, and it was the kids' first week of school. And among all of those things happening, I just put my main public website on autopilot, and I just said, and it worked out kind of nicely because a previous storyline had just ended. And so I was able to say, I'm taking a break for right now, but when I come back, the new Evil Link storyline will launch. And I took some bonus cartoons that I had done exclusively for Patreon, so nobody else had really seen them at that point. And on my update days, I just pulled stuff out of that archive and posted them on my site. So the people who were coming to my site as part of a routine wouldn't necessarily break the routine. There was something new for them, but it was a single panel cartoon. It was not Evil Inc. Patreon posts went as normal. I worked a lot in advance, and of course, when I was in Huntsville, I got a lot of work done there. Patreon, I kept my regular schedule up because really that's the heart of my business right now. I've got to do that. But in general, I took a huge break in August. I probably went to about 50% of my normal workflow. And it not only did it feel great, not only am I charged up and ready to attack the next month with glee, but nothing fell apart. In other words, I expected my website to fall apart, to go to zero. I expected to lose all my social media followers. I in the back of my head, I'm like, well, you're taking a risk here, Geiger. You're going to lose everything you spent 20 years building. The fact of the matter is that didn't happen. And I will easily be able to get back most of those stragglers who I may have missed, who said, he's not updating. I'm not going to see this anymore. I've got every chance of bringing them back on social media. When they do revisit the site, they're going to come back. And if not, the renewed energy I'm bringing to my storytelling is going to replace those people and probably more than that, you know? So I do want to say, and this has kind of been a theme this year, Dave, is that sometimes this whole idea of you have to post every day, you have to post
Yeah.
every day, or you have to post 3 days a week, or you've got to do, and that's something that we pushed really heavy in the webcomics weekly days because that was our reality. That was everybody's reality at
Oh,
that point.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
That was an ad-supported system. We're not there anymore, and I want to tell you, whether it's taking a vacation and spending some time with your family, whether it's you're feeling creatively bankrupt and you need to recharge, but you're scared to, or this comic you're working on just isn't working and you don't know why. Do not let all those fears that have built up inside of you stop you from taking a break. Taking a break is the best thing. It is without a doubt the best decision I made all year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I absolutely co-sign on that one. The break that I take between Christmas and New Year's every year, what ends up happening is I cement the familial bonds that are so important for a basic sense of well-being, right? That's super important. And then also I come back to cartooning with a sense of joy, like joy to be cartooning. And you forget that on days where you're like, Thursday, time to do another cartoon. It's like time to make the donuts, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that happens. And so when it's coming back from a 7, 10, 14-day break, you're like, yeah, I get to cartoon. This is my career. Woohoo. That kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. This is great.
I want to jump back though, because you said something really important. You said at one point you were wondering whether to do this, and your internal monologue was, Geiger, you're making a mistake here.
Yep.
And I like the fact that you self-refer to yourself in your own mind like a high school baseball coach chewing on a cigar. Like, that baseball coach that's like 60 pounds too heavy. The hat sits back on their head. They've got a little stubby cigar in their mouth. Like, Geiger, you're making a mistake. You're making a mistake with that curveball, Geiger. What are you doing throwing that curveball?
Yeah, it's basically Walter Matthau in Bad News Bears without all the racism and sexism.
Without all the racism.
Oh my God, Dave, don't try to go back and watch that movie. Oh, have you watched that movie lately?
Can I tell you? I've never watched that movie. I've never seen Bad News Bears.
Just don't. It holy cats. It'll make your eyes spin around in your head. But yeah,
there's a lot of 70s comedies that even as a white guy with all the entitlement that entails, you go back and watch it and you go, geez, I'm uncomfortable. This is really bad.
Yeah, what the heck was I thinking watching this? Bad News Bears was a delightful family comedy.
As a society, what the hell were we thinking where we're like, oh, this is okay, Police Academy or Airplane or any classic comedy, where you're like, geez, this is the worst. You're kind of like, I see what everyone was talking about. This is the worst thing. Anyway, Brad, I want to show you how professional we are. But the next sentence that I'm going to say, are you ready for it?
I am ready for you to say this sentence at 18 minutes into the show. Go ahead.
You knew what I was going to say. Well, hello, everybody. And welcome to Comic Lab, the show that knows how to do a quick cold open and go right into its intro.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. Woo!
So
I was wondering whether we were ever going to get into that.
No, that's on me, everybody. The professionalism there just is dripping from me this week as I know to do a quick 1 or 2 minute cold open and then right into the intro. Look at that, 18 minutes later. It just speaks to how much I enjoy talking to you. So let's go back into this. How much guilt did you feel while you were on vacation? Because that always gets me too.
Tons. It's like, I should be I should be doing something. I should be working. I should, and I was just really operating at the bare minimum. I was doing posts for webcomics.com. I was doing Patreon. I was doing things to make sure that everything was still kind of running. But compared to what I generally do, it was guilt-inducing for sure. And I will be completely honest. This first week back, I am excited. I'm thrilled. But getting back into this mindset of putting the amount of hours that I put into comics, it's been a little bit of a slow acceleration. In other words, I didn't just sit down on the first day back and just go right to 60. It's been a slow acceleration, and that's been nice too. It's nice just to kind of ramp up after a little while and kind of relearn your process because you haven't been doing it, and you've got to kind of address that again. It's been nice, but but while I was doing it, very guilty, very guilty.
Well, good. I am
well,
glad,
good.
Though, that
you deserved it.
No, I'm saying no, I'm sorry. My mind frame was wrong there. I'm saying, well, good in the sense that I'm glad you did it despite conversation is a basic skill of mine. Conversation is a basic skill of mine. The short version is I think you're wonderful, and I like it when you do good things for yourself. That's the short version.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was good. But and one thing that has been nice is that thread of sitting down and being able to talk to you every week has been nice. And it made me feel like I was still doing something useful. So along those lines, do you want to start talking comics?
Let's start talking. We were talking comics, but yes, start. Let's keep talking comics. Let's do it.
Yes. So here's topic number one. And we needed to get to this. I saw you just pop it right to the top of the list on Zencastr. Or Wonderlist. Let's do this one first. Viral content versus good content. Because what happened was this. I'll set this up. We had Zach Wienersmith on the show quite a while ago, and he said he cautioned when we were talking about success on social media. He said, well, remember, there's a difference between viral content and good content. And we've brought that topic back up a number of times, but in so doing, we kind of, I think we perverted what Zach was saying, or we kind of took it and twisted it because we set that up in subsequent episodes as a dichotomy. In other words, we said, well, listen, good content isn't viral content, and viral content isn't good content. And by the time we had swung around on that a few times, Dave, we set it up as opposites. And one of our patrons who does things that would be considered strictly for being viral content writes in and says, hey, guys, wait a minute. I create viral content, and I think it's very good, right? And so that caused Dave and I to go back and re-examine what we had been saying about good content versus viral content. And what did we come up with?
Well,
you tell me, Dave. I don't know what we came up with.
I like that. You said it so confident up until the last 4 words of that sentence that it threw me out. Like, imagine this, Brad. Like, I, Brad Geither, thee wed because I what? Because I what? Do I love you? What do I like? It got really weird towards the end there. I was like, wait,
well,
why is he coming to me?
I felt like I was talking for so long, so I wanted to hand it off to you.
Oh, I see. Okay, boy, we are all the wheels are greased today in terms of conversation. This is good. So no, Brad is right. That we got an email from a friend who we both respect greatly, who creates both really good and very, very viral content. We don't need to go pointing it out, but it's incredibly viral in the millions, and it is really good. So the Brad and I were chatting about it this morning, and I think the summation that we came out with is this. That good content is not necessarily viral, and viral content does not necessarily imply goodness or quality.
Right.
So that if you find yourself going, oh man, this comic was so viral, why didn't I get any new readers out of it? Well, maybe it was very viral in the sense that a cat getting hit in the nuts is also viral. But what?
I'll always laugh at cats getting hit in the nuts.
maybe the comic you created, and I've had a few of these, that it went super viral, but maybe looking back on it, maybe it wasn't that good a comic, quite frankly. It just hit on either a fandom, or it hit on an idea or a concept or a basic twist that no one had thought of before. But it doesn't necessarily mean that Sheldon was representative of all the great comics you could get at Sheldon. So I'm Reed Sheldon. I've also had ones that were incredibly good and not very viral. Like my comic strip drive as long form, I like to think is really good, but boy, is it not viral at all. There's no way to spread that thing in a viral way. So you can have very good content online that's incredibly satisfying, that really hits its audience, and they will spread it by word of mouth. But boy, that does not imply virality. And you can also have comics that are hugely viral. They can go out to millions and millions of people, but frankly, don't have any sort of imprimatur of goodness on them. They're not good comics, and they don't make anybody stick around. They don't make anyone stay. So yes, you reach 3 million people with that comic, but no one's searching out for like, hey, I like that one thing Brad did. What's the other things that Brad does?
Right.
Because it wasn't necessarily good. It just caught their eye. It was a spreadable meme type thing. But it didn't make them want to search out more of Brad's things. I don't know why I'm making it Brad about all of a sudden. But anyway, there we go.
But let's take that concept one more step further. Because what you said, we've tilled that ground pretty thoroughly. But the point that I want to get across now is sometimes good content, very good content, is also very viral content, and sometimes viral content is also very good. In other words, let's not consider that an opposite type of thing, that it's either one or the other. In fact, I saw on Twitter somebody who seemed to be kind of saying, well, this is the reason that my content isn't viral, because it's good and therefore it's not viral. And there is the possibility that your content is neither. Your content is neither viral nor is it good. So don't use this as a security blanket that you wrapped yourself up to and say, well, there's a reason nobody's sharing my work. It's because good content is not viral content. No. Some viral content is very good, and sometimes your content is neither. Sometimes you're neither viral nor are you good. You cannot take the fact that you're not being viral as an indication of quality. And that's why we needed to come back and take another swing at this topic, because we unintentionally kind of galloped along with what Zach said, and we set it up as an opposites sort of thing. And it's not an opposite. Really, the point there is that viral content is not necessarily good content. It's not, and good content is not necessarily viral. It's important to know that those can be two different things, but one does not preclude the other. In other words, these are not opposites. You can, at the same time, you can be viral and good, and you can be not viral and not good. That's an important thing to keep in your head.
Yes, I think another way to helpfully think about this is that there are two spectrums that you can apply a comic to, right? It's not that good is on one end of the spectrum and viral is on the other one, right? Which I think is how we were kind of constructing it. Mm-hmm. It's that there are two parallel, it's almost like two different statistics that you could give to a comic, right? And one is not very viral, and at the other end is very viral. And then your other statistic is not very good, and the other one is at the other end is very good. And so each comic could be rated on those two different scales at the same time. And it's not an either or. It's not that good is on one end and viral is at the other. It's that they're different rating scales. And so you could have one that really hits viral. It's way up at the top. And you know what? You jump up to the other scale, and it could also be that good is very high up on that scale.
Yeah.
But they are different and sometimes interrelating. And in fact, I would argue they're often interrelating, but they don't necessarily have to be interrelating. Is a good way to look at this.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail right on the head.
But I will a little bit, and maybe I'm unnecessarily dying on the sword. I will a little bit die on the sword by saying that if something is truly, truly viral, the odds are, this is maybe me getting in trouble, the odds are it's not permanently great. And what I mean by that is there's less likelihood that it has lasting value to someone's life, right? And I think that the things that are truly good, I'm just going to say it, I think are slightly less likely to be viral because the truly good bits of entertainment in life are harder to chew on, harder to, in the sense that I'm getting myself in trouble there. I can already see exceptions, but damn it, I'm going to die on that sword, Brad. I'm going to die on that sword that I think that I personally do feel that if something is truly viral, there's something about it that makes it a little bit more understandable to millions of people, and therefore is see, that's a quality to concern though.
Yeah.
I'm not going to die on this sword. I'm not going to die on this sword. I'm backing out.
You're starting to
Brad.
fascinate me because as you're talking, I just put a search string in for most retweeted tweets of all time, and I'd love to. I for another day. I'm going to take a look through these and see if that holds up to the sniff test, because I'd like to know if that there might be some truth to that. But I don't know. I'm going to argue the other side is that in a super viral piece of social media, whether it's a tweet or a Facebook post, there is a kernel of something that is worthy inside there. That there's a hidden universal truth inside that, and that may be the reason that it went viral.
That's true. And I also hesitated because I started to think, well, there's also a bourgeois subjective judgment of what goodness is, what quality is.
Yeah.
So I get that too. I don't want to be the dick that's saying like, well, the reason why Shakespeare is not viral is because it's truly good. Well, it's also because it's a 4-hour long play in Hamlet's case, and you really can't make that viral. But anyway, I just think it's an interesting discussion, and I think it's more complicated and nuanced than we had originally done it, which is why we wanted to come back on this in light of our listener's question. But I will stick to two things. I think that it is two sliding scales, not one, where goodness is on one end of the scale and virality is on the other end of the scale. That is an incorrect construction, and I think it's good we clarified that. I think it's two separate scales to judge any piece of work on, the virality of it and the quality of it, right? But I also think, and this is where I'm probably going to get myself into trouble, I also think that if something is super viral, there is a greater likelihood that it's less likely to be quality art.
Oh, well, let's put a pin in that for now, because I want to go back and do some research now. Now I'm fascinated.
Okay, all right, and I'm willing to admit, even before we do the research, I'm willing to admit that that's me being snobbish, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but my gut, my spidey sense tells me that that's the case. So we'll see. Anyway. So, Brad, we have another $5 question. Can I ask you this one? Do you mind? Do you have a second? Do you have a moment, Brad?
No, you can't.
I'm like a person outside of a grocery store. Sir, a moment of your time? All right. Okay, so here's the question. Dave and Brad, with having used Bonjoro for a few months now, are you still using it on a daily basis? Or have you seen a slip in your usage, Brad? Brad, have you seen a slip in your usage? This is a broader question that I want to ask you, Brad. Have you seen a slip in your usage?
Boy, my usage used to be pretty robust, and I'm going to be 50 next April, and you better believe there's a slip in my usage.
Ask your doctor if the slip in your usage represents a bigger problem in your life.
I need to take more ginkgo biloba.
Ginkgo biloba. Hey doc, my usage is just not. There's been a real slip. I got a real slip in the old usage, doc. Oh boy, Mr. Geiger, that is a problem. We're gonna have to take a look at that. Yeah, it's slipping all over the place. Anyway, Brad, have you noticed the slip in your usage? Well, I'm a 9-year-old. I'm a 9-year-old. All right, go ahead. Have you noticed the slip in your usage, Brad, with Bonjoro?
So, in a way, yes, because yes and no, I'll say. In other words, for a while there, because it was a new toy, I wanted to play with it. And
oh, God, jeez Louise. You're not helping it. Oh, don't encourage me. Oh.
Well, what I'm trying to say is when somebody would sign up to Patreon or webcomics.com or something, I would immediately send this out because it was neat. It was neat. It was fun to do. What would happen after a little while, if I didn't do it daily, or even every other day, I very quickly amassed kind of a backlog, and I'm like, oh, geez, I need to sit down and do these, and then I'd have to find the right place and the right time to do this if I'm going to do it well. And for a while, I would be like as much as 3 weeks behind, 4 weeks behind
Oh
of doing
no,
a
yeah.
Bonjoro, because that stuff accumulates really quickly, and then I'm like, oh man, that's kind of not great, and not using Bonjoro to its best. Really, in my opinion, the best way to use Bonjoro is to get that video out as quickly as you can, as soon as close to the sign up date or sign up time as you can, because really you're making kind of an emphasis statement. You're kind of it's really is, if you get that video out there quickly, you're saying to your backer, you are very important. In fact, I
Right.
just got back up on the horse this past couple of weeks, and a Patreon backer for After Dark signed up, and I was just happened to be doing a whole bunch of them, and this one popped in, and I did it within like 15 minutes of this guy signing up. And he wrote back and he's like, "Holy cats, I was not expecting that. This is." He goes, "With the number of patrons and stuff, and you must be, really overworked to be doing all this stuff." And of course that's beautiful, because it gives you a chance to say back to that patron, "Yeah, it's a little extra, but you're worth it. You're important to me." That's really what you want to have happen with a Bonjoro,
Yeah.
is you want that opportunity, not only to say it through actions, but then later on, if you get a chance, if they open up that line of communication, yeah, verbalize it. Yeah, you're important to me. That's
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
beauty of Bonjoro. How
And
about
you're
you?
also you're also I just want to emphasize that point.
Yeah,
You're not only saying to them that you're important to me, you're also saying, when you do it quickly, you're saying as a cartoonist, I'm on top of things. Like
yeah.
you've done a good thing by backing me. Don't worry about it. You're not going to get. So when you get a message a week later, it's also, you're no longer top of mind to the activity. Like, for example, if I buy a movie on iTunes, I don't know why Apple does this. I get an emailed receipt for it like 7 days later. It's like, well, why are
Hmm.
you getting me a receipt 7 days? Just send it to me when I bought the movie on iTunes. Like, why are you? I don't know what this weird setting is. And so it kind of throws you a little bit. But if Apple sent me it 5 minutes after I rented the movie, you go, okay, great, they're on top of it. Awesome, thanks. So when I send a Bonjoro out within 15, 20, 35 minutes of someone signing up for something or paying for something or buying something, they go, oh, wow, this is really cool. And you're still in my thoughts, fresh from on the top of my brain there, because I just signed up for something or bought something. And then two, what a cool and immediate response. You really got your stuff humming over there. Great job, Dave. Thanks so much. So it has a nice 1-2 punch. Why are
Yeah,
you laughing?
you I would have never thought about that, but that makes absolute perfect sense. You are sending that message in a very real way, that you're on top of things. And especially for something like a Patreon, as Patreon gets more and more popular, we're going to see the same thing that has happened in webcomics in general, particularly in webcomics business, and that is, sometimes somebody's going to do business with a webcomic, maybe signing up for a Kickstarter, or just reading a webcomic that then doesn't update according to what its schedule is, and doesn't give you a reason for that. That leaves a reader with a sense of being burned, when all of a sudden, oh, Jesus isn't here, and there's no indication of why it's not here. That's the bar that you can just jump right over in demonstrating that you are on top of your business.
Well,
It's
and
a good message.
let me give you another. This is another pro tip. The cost of acquiring a new customer, which is what this person is to you, in a sense, in a
Mm-hmm.
cold way, if you want to look at it in a business term, the cost of acquiring a new customer can be 6 or 7 times higher than the cost of retaining a customer. So what you're doing with this Bonjoro is you're saying, good God, someone is signing up for my Patreon. They're giving me money. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Everything that we've done up to this point is awesome. They've locked in. And so now with this Bonjoro, what you're doing is you're solidifying it with something that really only takes you 1 or 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And you're locking it down at a very minimal cost, versus all the spray and pay advertising or marketing you would have to do, or viral reach you'd have to do to get someone new to sign up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh, that is a real quantifiable expense for most businesses, is that it's 6 to 7 times more expensive to acquire a new customer than it is to retain a new customer. So this Bonjoro app is really such a low-cost way to say, stick with me, kid, we're going places, you know?
Well, this brings me to my next topic, and that is this. When did we start with Bonjoro? It's been a couple months, hasn't it?
I don't know.
It seems like we started back at the very beginning of summer.
Yeah, that
I
seems
know,
right.
I know this.
And you know what? We should remind people, by the way, if you're a Patreon backer of this show, do a quick search on the old patreon.com/Comic Lab, because we have a discount code for you for Bonjoro.
Absolutely.
I believe that's still valid, but yes, they were very kind and gave Comic Lab backers a discount. So if at the end of this, if you're curious about Bonjoro, but anyway, I cut you off, Brad. I'm sorry. You were going to say something.
I'm just going back. I think my first Bonjoro was sent back in May. So we've been, the main point is we've been doing this for a while now. What are your stats? There's 4 main stats that Bonjoro shares with us: open rate, view rate, thank yous, and click-through rate. And I wanted to see, since we're doing very different things, I wanted to compare your stats with mine to see if there's any crossover.
So you want to see if you want to compare the slip in your usage versus the slip in my usage. Is that what you want to do?
I want to compare the numbers more than anything else.
I was just trying to make a weird sex joke, and you didn't do it. You didn't play along. Damn it, Bradley! I was trying to make a sex joke.
For the first time in my life, I was able to feign confidence.
All right, so by way of quick explanation, just for people that don't remember, when someone signs up for Brad for Patreon, right? They go, "I love Evil Inc. Brad, here's $2." Brad gets a notification in his Bonjoro app that says, "Hey, Dave just signed up for your Bonjoro app." And then he sends a quick video that says, "Hey, it's Brad Geiger here in the studio. Dave, I just saw you signed up on Patreon. I want to say thank you so much. You're amazing." Boop. And it sends the video off to me, and I get it via email. And so the open rate is, did I even click the email that Bonjoro sent, right? So that's the first stat you're going to hear. The second stat is, they have a tiny little animated GIF of the first 2.5, 3 seconds of the video. And so as a way of enticing people. And so the next stat is, did they click on the video? Did they watch the video, right? And then the third stat, the thank you one is, and this one's kind of stupid, did they send you a thank you back? And frankly, who cares? It's lovely, but it's a stat that doesn't really tell you that much.
Okay.
Oh, Brad with a differing opinion that we'll hear about in a moment.
Yes.
And then the fourth stat, I guess, is actually actionably or demonstrably important, which is it's a click through for whatever call to action you've added on to the end of your video. Like, hey, here, go check out my store, or hey, here's 20% off of my PDF ebooks or something, right?
Right.
So that's the last call to action stat you'll hear. So here are my stats without further ado, starting from the bottom back up. My click through rate of people watching my video and then going, "Oh, Dave's giving me 20% off on his store." That's 14%. Now, by any stretch, what's the average considered great click-through rate? It's like 2 or 3%, right?
Yeah. On like web advertising, it's down in the fractions of percents. Right. Anything I've always considered on any project, a click-through rate of greater than 3 to 5% is gangbusters.
Right. So, demonstrably, that's great. I'm happy with 14. That's fine. My thank yous, where someone sends me a little happy bear or whatever that is, Brett. I don't know why I consider that one bullshit and you like that one, but that's fine.
I'll tell you why in a minute.
Okay. So this is one saying someone clicking on the thank you after they've watched the video. That's 45%. The open rate of how many people open the email, 86%. And then to me, the most important rate of all, how many people have actually watched the video that I recorded for them that says, "Hey, it's Dave Kellett in the studio. Thank you, Brad. So nice to be back," whatever. That's 83%, which to me, I'm very happy with that rate. I'd love to get it up to 90%, but 83% watch rate is fine by me.
Wow. I can't wait to share my numbers with you. All right.
Now let's hear the Brad Geiger stats.
I'll do it in the same order you did it. Click-through rate for me, you had 14, I have 10%. So a little bit lower than yours.
Okay.
Thank you rate, For you, you had 45%. For me, I'm nudging you out a little bit, 47%. And
Nice.
I'll tell you at the end why I think that's really more important than you're giving it credit for. We both have very similar open rates, and that you've got, in other words, all they do is open it and nothing else. You've got 86%. I've got 84%. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road. View rate, you've got 83%. I've got 59%.
Oh,
And it
wow.
just, yeah. Well, and I'm telling you, Dave, it confirms what I said about Bonjoro right from the start for my specific usage. I think most people that back, particularly me at my not safe for work levels at the $10 level, when they get any kind of correspondence from me, they're expecting a certain aesthetic. They're expecting a certain type of image. And when they click open that message and it's my face looking back at them, I think I think it's so far away from the aesthetic that they were hoping for that they just I think they close the email and go running from the room.
I like the idea of the the average backer on Patreon is like, oh, I'm really enjoying these comics about these super in shape superheroes doing it. That's really fantastic. I want to back that. And then they back it, and then they get this email like, oh, that's not what I backed. Hey, oh, hold on. Hello,
Yeah, you hear
I'm
that?
Brad Geiger. Thank you for backing me on Patreon. Let me just finish my ding dong. Anyway, thank you for backing me.
Why
Have
did
a
it
good
have
week.
to be a ding dong?
You have all the chocolate foods I
Out of
picked. Why did I
all
pick
the
ding dong?
foods,
Oh God!
could have been a
Oh
Twinkie.
God! That ding dong. Even a Twinkie wouldn't have been good. Hold on, let me finish this Twinkie. So yes, I think what you need to do, Brad, is to start that 3-second GIF to get people to click on it. What you need to do is you need to hold up your character up to the camera, and then
Yeah.
after they've clicked it to start watching the video, you go, "Hey, behind that piece of paper, it's me, Brad Geiger, everybody."
Yeah, like hold up a little picture.
And then you can watch your finished watching rate drop dramatically.
Yeah, thank God Bonjoro doesn't give you that. But yeah, I'll just hold up in front of the screen a picture of a porn star, and then behind I'll be going, "Hello, I'm so happy," and kind of jiggling it back and forth. I'm so happy that you're a backer.
By the way, that voice was amazing in kind of a Mr. Rogers sort of way. That's a great character. Hello, I'm from the Wonderland there.
You know how many porn stars talk like that too,
Sure, yes, okay.
Hello. I gotta
Hello,
tell
Mr. Rogers. I'm new. I'm a new character on the show.
Yeah. Oh boy, there's an addition to the neighborhood. But I got to tell you, Dave, real quick,
Okay.
before because we've got some nuts and bolts advice, but I got to tell you, speaking of talking behind a photograph, I'm teaching a storytelling class at University of the Arts. And in my introduction of why narrative is important, I told them, of course, narrative is a part of painting. It's a part of illustration. Narrative's a part of theater and film. But I said, if your career is going to be like the vast majority of people your age going into the arts, you're going to have to understand narrative on a much bigger scale, and that is the narrative as it applies to crowdfunding. There's a narrative aspect to Kickstarter. There's a narrative aspect to Patreon. And you can see this very clearly through the videos people often post. And I used your video as an example, as I've done in the past, specifically for Anatomy of the Animals. And you start out with a picture of with yourself saying, you may know me from this or that, or from my spot on Tom Hanks impersonation. Then you come up to a picture of Tom Hanks and your face just on the side going, hello, I'm a Tom Hanks. The entire room just lost it. It was wonderful. You got a big laugh on that.
Yeah, that was a very last minute thing I added to that video, but it was such a great bookend because it also, the video ends with, anyway, I'm a Tom Hanks, and thanks for backing this to Kickstarter. It was just like this weird, like Mario pseudo-Italian, not at all Tom Hanks, but it just sells it because it's clearly me talking onto the side of the picture. It's great.
Yeah, that's how I'm going to start my Bonjoros for my After Dark backers now. I'm going to start exactly with that. But
hi, it's me, Brad Geiger. Hi, how are you?
but
Thanks so much for backing me. But I want to
go ahead.
I want to put a capstone on this that speaks beyond the statistics, because I almost can't emphasize this enough when I say I have been a cartoonist for 20 years online, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to oversell this, but the emails that I have gotten from these Bonjoros have been through the roof, thankful and kind and almost superfluously written, that they're 4 or 5 paragraphs long. Like, I've started reading you when it's so nice of you to send a video to me, just me, for backing you on Patreon. I've meant to back your work, and now I'm going to go on. And here's the thing that's even more important. At the end of a lot of these letters, they're like, and boy, and seeing your face, now I want to go back your other comic Drive, or I want to go back your other comic Sheldon, or I want to go get a book for my cousin now. Anyway, thanks so much. And I know it because I then see it an hour or two later when they buy a book on my store, or I get another patron on the other thing. So Bonjoro, I have found, is just a way to solidify that, frankly, personal relationship in a way that costs you a minute but means a lot to certain kinds of people.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's all genuine. When I thank someone on a video, it's 100%. None of that is fake. I'm like, Susan, hey, it's Dave in the studio. My God, I'm so happy to see you and see you back in the comic. All of that is genuine. It's super exciting when someone believes in my work enough to say, here, have $2 every month. That's amazing.
No, I agree 100%. Going backwards, you mentioned something I want to underline in case our listeners missed it. You mentioned waving in the first part of your video. You do that, and now I do it, specifically for a reason, and that is when your video gets sent, they take the first few frames and they make an animated GIF. And Bonjoro's research has shown that if you do something eye-catching, with just like emotion, like waving at somebody, that instead of just standing there and your lips are moving, right? If you wave in the first opening seconds of your Bonjoro, they have shown that increases the open rate. Yeah. So do open your Bonjoro recording by waving a little bit into the camera. That's a nice kind of eye. There's a reason we wave when we're trying to catch somebody's attention. It's an eye grabbing kind of move. So definitely it's the same, that.
I think, Brad, that it's the same kind of philosophy as the stores that hire someone to wave around a sign on a street corner.
Mm-hmm.
There's something very human to the fact that we look to a human that's doing big motions. It catches our eye.
Yes.
And so if you see a GIF of Brad Geiger waving, you go, oh, wait, something's happening down there on that email. I got to go click on this thing.
Yes.
So it's just a very natural reaction, I think.
And here's why I think thank yous are more important. That third to last statistic.
Right. Yeah. What's your thought? Yeah.
Don't discount those, because really what you want to know is that your video made an impact. And the only way, other than the fact that they watched it, and like we mentioned, we don't know whether they view it all the way to the end. They might watch it for the first 5 seconds and turn it off, roll their eyes in disgust, and close the email. So view rate is an indication at least that they were interested enough to hit play. But thank you is where you find out that they've watched probably, arguably, at least half or more of your video, and they're pleased. Now, you can say that the click-through rate is where you find whether they're pleased, but our click-through, the little thing at the bottom is like 20% off the Sheldon store, 5% off the Evil Ink store. I guess I'm a skinflint. No wonder my click-through rate is so low. I got to up my discount. But the important thing is they still know that if they click on that link, they're going to be taken to a place of commerce where they're going to be tempted to spend even more money than they already spent, and they're going to not necessarily want to do that. But thank you. That's your indication, and there's no skin lost. It's a very easy way for them to just click, boink, the like button, like they've been doing on social media since for the last 10 years. It's just a way for them to indicate a thumbs up. This has been a good experience. Even if they don't take the time to click through to the store, even if they don't take the time to write a long, flowery email, you know that you hit the target. And that's why I think thank yous are important.
Well, and there's another fun little stat that we didn't talk about.
Yeah.
But when you get the results from Bonjoro, it'll be like, I sent a video to Brad Geiger. I can see how many times you viewed it. And
Yeah.
I'll be honest, 80%, 90% of the time it's one view, but it's
Right.
always so satisfying when you get like 3 views. And you're like, wow, they watched it 3 times. That's really cool. And then every once in a while, you get one that's like 7 views, and you're like, I can never take public transportation again. That's a stalker.
Those are the ones that are a little frightening. The sweet spot there is 2 or 3. That means they showed their spouse, they showed a friend. 7, 8, 9, you got to change your address now.
Yeah, they went and got a glass of wine. That's trouble when they
for that all important 4th viewing where they're going to start slowing it down a little bit.
It's kind of like that old rule of like on a date, never go to a second location. It's when it gets to 4th and 5th viewing, you're like, this is not good. This is not good. We've gone into troubled territory, Bradley.
He's starting to talk back to the video. This is not good. So, Dave, just how thankful are you for my Patreon support?
I have to say this, though. I have become, and I know that to people outside of this, I might sound a little too crazy for Bonjoro, but I can't emphasize enough how excited I am about it. But I said this the other day in the studio, and I said, I wish there was a way that I could link my Kickstarter account to Bonjoro, because how fun would it be to say, oh my God, you pledged the Kickstarter. Thank you so much. Please spread the word. We're already unlocking stretch goal. I thought that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And Beth turns around in her chair in the studio and she goes, you had 1,600 backers for this book last time. You can't send out 1,600 Bonjoros. And I was like, I would do it. I honestly would do it.
Of course you
would.
And
she's like, that is just stupid. Just send out a video on Kickstarter. Don't do Bonjoros. Anyway, you can't. The short version of this long story is that you can't actually send Bonjoros to Kickstarter. They don't give you the information.
Really?
To even
that
email
seems
them.
like a no-brainer to me. Yeah.
On a new backer, you don't get if you, Brad Geiger, were to back my Kickstarter right now.
Fat chance.
Yeah, I don't get your.
No, wow. I'm already up for one. I've been waiting for this book. But now
my usage is really slipping with Brad.
Yeah, no kidding. Now listen, you couldn't possibly send me a Bonjoro? You don't have my email
because
at that point?
have. Here's the thing: until the 30 days are up and the Kickstarter commits, I don't get your email. I don't get your contact information.
Oh,
which
I think
is actually smart on Kickstarter's part, because they don't want you spamming people.
Right? Or they don't want you coming back on somebody who may have canceled a pledge.
Exactly. Yes, Brad
yeah.
Geiger. Yes. So I think it's wisdom on Kickstarter's part.
Yes.
It's probably learned the hard way, I'm sure. So I couldn't even if I wanted to. The only way to do it is to send the video updates, which are fine. It's lovely. But I just thought being able to approach those 1,600 people in person would have been amazing, or not in person, but by a Bonjoro would have been amazing and powerful. But c'est la vie, can't be done.
Yeah.
So that's that.
All the best. So I think we've got time for one more topic. What do you think?
I think anything that Brad Geiger wants to do, I am down with. That's what I think.
Well, here's a topic that came up just recently, and it really has me thinking. I'm fascinated to get your thoughts on it. Why do we hate thought balloons so much in comics? In other words, in comics, the whole idea of using that cloudy balloon that has the little bubbles that lead to it instead of a smooth word balloon with a tail, using that cloudy indication that now you are showing the inner thoughts of the character that the bubbles point to. Why do we hate that so much? Do you have any thoughts?
I have a lot of thoughts, actually.
Go ahead.
Then I was going to say, would you like to hear them? I don't know why I was going to say that. So here are my thoughts. Both a voice bubble and a thought balloon, if you look at the construction of a comic, those two inventions are the most artificial representation of what's happening in a comic.
Mm.
But here's what I mean by that.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking at a single panel of action of any comic, a comic book, comic strip, comic panel, whatever it is, the human mind can imagine it as though you're looking through a window. That's an artifice and a construction that we understand. The human mind already deals with that every day, right? We look through windows, we look through door frames, we look around corners, down hallways. So we're used to the idea of action being framed through this thing that you're looking through, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's already naturalistic a little bit. Then the drawing of a human being or a character or an animal or an alien, all of that, there's thousands of years of human history where we've already come to accept that like a line art image can represent a 3D object, right? So even that is kind of accepted now.
Right.
Writing down words to represent thought. My God, how many times a day do we do that? So we're already accepting of that. But the most artificial and therefore weird aspect of a comic is the voice bubble and the thought bubble. Those are the unique, weird ways that we have figured out how to represent an action that's taking place. And the action being, I'm thinking this or I'm saying this. And it's weird. It is weird. It's a weird way to do it. And I can say that it's weird because as someone who studied the history of comics, you look at how they did it in 1787 with a Gilray comic or with a Hogarth comic, and the voice bubble would literally touch the lip of the person that was talking, because they couldn't figure out, well, how the hell do I indicate that it's this lord talking and that's the king talking over there? Oh, I guess I'll just have this bubble touch the person's lip. And it's weird. It's freaky. It looks like their soul is leaving their body. Yeah. It's like, what was going on? Because no one had figured out a pattern on how to do it or how to, like, it wasn't a system yet. It was just like, I don't know. How do we get it to indicate that it's this dude? All right, have it touch his lip. It's weird. But that's me talking for too much. So why do you think a thought? So you're specifically, I know you're focusing in on thought bubbles, but I took it broader that both voice bubbles and thought bubbles are weird when you stop to think about them.
But yes, they're weird if you think about it in that way, but they're intrinsic in making a comic. In other words, you can't take word balloons and thought balloons out. Well, you can. It's a pantomime comic. You can do a wordless comic. But for most of us, you can't take those elements out and still have a comic, right?
You can. I think, doesn't Dilbert not use voice bubbles a lot?
Well, no, he uses what I would call a bubble-less voice bubble. In other words, there's not a circle around the words, but there's still words floating above the character's head with a tail pointing down to the speaker. It's what I call in the Everything Cartooning book an open word balloon.
Oh, but it's still inventing phrases. Yeah, boy, you and Mort Walker. Great, good job. All right.
That and Booth Barnacle might the two I got. No, but I consider that's still a word balloon because there's an invisible border around it. Nothing can encroach on because obviously that's going to hurt legibility. So it's still there even though it's invisible. It's an open word balloon. You still have to have words paired with images. And I specifically, you wouldn't try to take the word balloons out of a comic unless you were specifically trying to do something like what's Mark, what's his face's syndicated comic, Leo, the one that has no words.
Yeah, Leo, yeah.
And there was also before that, there was a syndicated comic called Henry that never had words. It was all pantomime. But even then, there's a lot of obstacles you come up against. There would be a voice balloon that would point, and it would maybe have a picture inside of it instead of words. But if you're going to do that, you might as well just put the words in. I mean, come on. But even beyond that, there's been a real, over the last 20 years or so, thought balloons specifically in comics have kind of become demonized. And I just wanted to examine why that was, because I don't think it's I think what's happened is that it's a reaction, and that has become an overreaction. And I'll tell you what I mean. Go back and look at those early Stan Lee, Steve Ditko Spider-Man comics, like the very first several issues that came out, and you will see exactly what comic creators started pushing back against. And that's not only an overuse of thought balloons, but using a thought balloon as a crutch. In other words, one of the principal thoughts behind comics is show, don't tell. And if you look at Spider-Man, for example, you'll see thought balloons like, here's what I'm looking at right now. It's circling me, emitting thick black smoke to blind me. Well, that's a useless thought balloon. You should be able to draw those two actions. He's describing two actions. The mechanical object is circling Spider-Man. Well, you should be able to draw that. And emitting a thick black smoke, you should be able to draw that. In fact, Ditko does a perfectly good job of drawing both of those. you kind of get the picture that maybe Stan Lee, who would add the words after the illustrations were done, right? He would just add the dialogue. Maybe Stan was trying to kind of justify his presence there by putting as many words there as he could, because throughout those early Spider-Man comics, you see a lot of the action described in the word balloons, or I'm sorry, the thought balloons. And so what happened was, as comics matured, they started to mature. And as they did, they started saying, hey, we don't need a thought balloon for every action. We can show this action happening. We don't need that. And so that started happening, and comics artists started to pull away. Also, if you read some interviews with creators who were working at that time, they'll tell you that comics, which in the beginning started to draw its inspiration from movies, now there was the need for comics to keep up with movies. They felt themselves becoming on parity with movies, and to win that struggle, to win the competition of which of those two things a kid was going to spend his money on, a comic book or a movie. They felt the need to meet the movies on their playing ground, and there were no thought balloons in movies, or the equivalent where you hear the speaker's voice in a wavy kind of way, even though the speaker's lips aren't moving. That's a way a movie or a TV show might show you that a thought is happening. There wasn't a whole lot of that, and so a lot of the comics writers from the time. It said, yeah, we stopped doing that because they didn't do that in movies. And over time, that almost became an edict from the comics publishers, where they said to the writers, you may not use thought balloons, which fascinates me.
I have Spider-Man is a great a reference to pull up, by the way, and I'll tell you why. Because Spider-Man not being on a team, he really it's hard to write Spider-Man. It's hard to write any character-based comic that's just one character.
Yeah.
Because so much exposition, so much pipe can get laid just by basic conversation. And so if you don't have a second character, if you don't have anybody, then all you have is the thought balloon. And so you have these things where Peter Parker is talking for like 4 pages in his head, and you're like, all right, would you really be saying that, Pete? Or are we just trying to get some exposition out here? Like it's really it's awkward. So Spider-Man's a perfect example of that. But anyway, the thought balloon in general, to get back to your central idea here, it's a goofy format. It's this bouncy cloud that looks like it's kind of out of a My Little Pony comic, you know?
Yes, Scott McCloud calls them the bulgy Edsels of comics iconography.
Yeah. Oh, it is like an Edsel. Yeah, it's just weird. It's a weird shape, to the point where when I do a thought balloon, I don't even make the cloud. I just give it a normal voice balloon, but then in lieu of a tail, I do 3 bubbles down or 4 bubbles down, you know? Because I really dislike how that shape works in comics. To me, it genuinely looks stupid to have this bulbous bouncing cloud line that makes a circle. And it's an imperfect circle, and no one does it well. I've never seen a thought bubble where I was like, that's a good thought bubble. Boy, I tell you what, Susan's really good at drawing those thought bubbles. She's really nailing it there. That's amazing. I know. Honestly, think of a comic where you're like, well, that's a great thought bubble. Really great execution on that thought bubble. Really wonderful.
Part of me loves that history of comics so much that I look at a thought bubble and I think that it's definitive of the medium.
Here's what I'm hearing when you say that.
Yeah.
I just said, no one does a good thought bubble. I can tell you what just happened in Brad's head. He went, I do a pretty good thought bubble. I like the way I do thought bubbles. How can I say this? And then you're like, well, I just think it's definitive of the medium. I respect it as a format. I just think it's real pretty.
Let me tell you.
Meantime, Brad's like, my thought bubbles are great. Why doesn't Dave like my thought bubbles?
No, I can assure you, because
Roger never has a second cup at home. Why do
I take the thought bubble right out of Manga Studio. Because it's nice and even, and I don't draw them at all. I just use the same way I do a voice bubble. I just grab it right out of Manga Studio. But but I've never been bothered by that.
Iconographically speaking, a thought bubble to me feels like Comic Sans. There's no
Really?
good way to dress up Comic Sans.
Wow.
It just feels goofy.
Wow, I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna have to start looking at these again. I've never understood the visceral reaction, and now hearing you talk, I'm understanding it a little bit better. But man, I don't know. So let me ask you this: we come into the late '70s and early '80s. Frank Miller does Elektra. And he's pushing back against that whole edict of no thought balloons. So he turns the character's thoughts into narration, and now they appear in narrator boxes, the rectangular boxes that float above and have no connection to the speaker or the thinker. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't hate it. I think also, doesn't Watchmen do that? Let me think.
Oh yeah, because after Frank did it, people were like, "Oh my God, we could do this. We could totally make that work." And then there's a big explosion of thoughts being carried out in narration boxes, and it's almost the de rigueur kind of way to do a thought balloon now, especially in comics published by the main publishers.
I love it when you and I do French. That was great. My laissez-faire last week and your de rigueur this week. Right now, there's a French speaker out there just going, "God damn it, don't speak French, you two." We just sound like two morons from Queens trying to, yeah, it's pretty de rigueur to have the laissez-faire attitude.
Well, it is very rigueur.
It's pretty. Is it de rigueur? No, it's oregano. It's a different kind of. It's Prego. It's a different. I ruined the joke. So I'm actively looking through Evil Ink as we speak, and I'm trying to see where your voice bubbles are. I'm not seeing them.
I don't often use a thought balloon, especially for the sort of thing that I do in the Evil Ink storytelling. I don't use a lot of thought balloons, but every now and again, there's a moment that can be done with nothing but a thought balloon, and I don't think twice about using it. I just think it's part of the iconography of comics.
I mean, it is part of the iconography. It's just the dumb part of iconography of comics. That's why I think Scott McCloud hit it on the head that iconographically speaking, it's like an Edsel Ford. It just is an ugly. It's an imperfect and ugly. Like everybody understands it. No one's going to be like, "What's this object?" But I don't know. It's you know what looks infinitely better when someone does a robotic voice bubble. Like if a robot is talking, like even that is kind of stupid, but it still looks better than a thought bubble. A thought bubble is just dumb. It's just dumb. Let's just be honest with ourselves.
Well, I think I'm going to have to disagree with you. I hate to do that because you're a very smart person and you've put way more. You've got 2 master's degree in this stuff. If I were smart, I would just say, yeah, you're right. No,
it's a subjective call. You're totally allowed. Listen, it's de rigueur that you're allowed to disagree with me. No, I'll tell you why you're allowed to disagree with me. Because it works. It works fine. Like everybody understands
I guess that's my point. I'm more pragmatic than aesthetic when it comes to this. In other words, my challenge is I need to show you what this character is thinking. That's the thing. That's what the story calls for right now. If I can do that by putting the words inside of a cloud, and I know that 90% of my audience knows exactly what that means. Hell, 99% knows exactly what that means. Then that's what I use.
Right. Well, I've now gone through in the course of us talking. I've navigated through about 40 comics in your archives, and I have not seen a single thought bubble. So for somebody who's so pro thought bubble, I got to tell you, you haven't used a dang thought bubble in your comic for over a month.
But that's my point. It's not something that I don't think you should be using thought balloons an awful lot. But I think when the time comes, you should pull that trigger.
Okay, well, that's fair. That's fair. I'm just saying it a little bit speaks to how you feel about them that you haven't used them. Like you have found a way to write without them is another way to say it.
Yes,
you know?
Yes. Well, and that comes back to the original push away from the thought balloon, and that was we should be showing and not telling. And I believe very strongly in that. I think 80% of a comic is in the ability to show that action visually.
Right.
If I saw myself using too many thought balloons, I know that I'm being lazy. And that's what you see again in those early comics, that you see a thought balloon being used in place of good illustration.
Yeah, or in my case, you'll see a smash cut away from a scene right before a gigantic space battle, so that I don't have to draw the space battle.
Yeah. Yeah, we've all backed away from something like that going, oh my God, do I really want to draw all of those itty bitty little shapes?
Yeah, exactly. I have all of the Roman army cresting the hill against the Visigoths. Do I want to draw this? No.
No, I would much rather cut to somebody on the hill saying, hey, look at that Roman army. They're crushing against the Visigoths.
Yeah, exactly. That's Steve Ditko going, Stan, just write it in a voice bubble. I don't want to draw that. Just...
Yeah, that's I think we can agree on that one. We've all been there.
I am fascinated and appreciative of the fact that we disagree on that one, because maybe we don't disagree. We both would say use it when you need it in terms of a voice bubble. I would just say you're a real dummy if you use it. No, I'm just kidding. Brad, having said this, I bet if you look back through the last 50 or so drive, I've used it on something, because there's always some internal monologue that there's no other way to communicate it except for a thought bubble. It happens. Like you said, the first priority is to show it, don't tell it. And then frankly, maybe the second priority is to tell it, don't think it. And the third priority is to think it. And so maybe there's a great chain of being with the ways comics should work, and thought bubbles should be at the bottom of the great chain of being there.
Yeah. And I'll tell on myself a little bit here. The last couple times that I've used a thought balloon, it was kind of a crutch, but it wasn't a storytelling crutch necessarily. Something was happening in the story that I knew a certain number of my readers were going to misinterpret. And it's because it involved a small plot point that was maybe several weeks earlier. And so I put in a thought balloon. Well, of course, she doesn't know that because she wasn't there that day, or something like that. That explains the plot. Not necessarily action, but the plot. And it was a crutch because I just couldn't face getting those emails in the morning where people are like, well, how come she didn't know who he was? Well, that was part of the plot. And that's part of the necessity of an ongoing webcomic on the web, is that these updates get spread out. So I will say that every now and again, I do use them, and I acknowledge that it's a crutch. But I will argue that there are still some storytelling points that need to take a word balloon, and I don't think you should feel bad about using them. I think they're part of iconography, and you use that in the same way that you are ruthless about using as much contrast as you can in your word balloon, black letters on white background in my opinion, at all times. That's you take that same ruthlessness and you apply it to that, and you say, hey, I need to show a thought. Boom, I'll use a thought bubble. Next panel.
Yep. No, I think you're right. On that. I would agree with you. I think you have not slipped your usage in that regard. I think you've.
Well, then listen. While we agree, before we have any more chance to talk ourselves out of it, I want to tell you that you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been your de rigueur host, Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the cartoonist of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And Dave Kellett, the master of Flop It and Firm It and Flop It, co-director of... I just listened to that episode. Did you hear? Oh, by the way, you guys, if you're not listening to the whole show, Matt put that in at the very end of that show, and it killed me. You listening to Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped and cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com. Check out his new Kickstarter, drivekickstarter.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions at www.woodsong.media.
Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/Comic Lab, so we'll go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/Comic Lab. And, kind of jiggling it back and forth. I'm so happy that you're a backer.